All right, herb nerds and herb nerd adjacents, I guess. Hey, I'm here to answer the question, why do we buy the majority of our herbs from China? Hi, I'm Dave with Herbalogic, and we produce herbal extracts based on traditional Chinese medicine. And I get this question a lot. And it turns out that the answer is kind of complicated because it relies on history and culture and science, but that's the part that makes it fascinating. So if you are interested in why good herbs are good herbs, stick around for a minute. I think you'll find this really cool, and I love to talk about herbs. So if you have questions about any of this, drop me a comment, and I would love it if you did I don't know where the thing is. If you did the thing, that'd be great. Okay, so where do we start? Let's start with this. People think you buy things from China because it's cheap, and that couldn't be any further from the truth. All right, let's start with the concept in Chinese. We'll put it up here. Yao cai hao, yao cai hao. Good quality herbs make good quality medicine, right? And this is not an ancient saying. It's like a kind of a modern tagline, but I think it cuts to the quick of what farmers and herbalists have been doing for centuries, which is this idea. We'll introduce a new idea. It's called Dao Di, right? The Chinese Dao Di, right? Which literally translates as the way of the earth, or a little bit more woo-woo, the sort of authentic path of the land. And the one I hate the most, geo-authentic. Right, and Dao Di is this idea that there is a right place for this plant, right? There's a right place. The altitude, the latitude, the soil, the climate, the rain is all right for this plant, and that in that place, that plant will produce the highest levels of these therapeutic compounds that we rely on for it to be Yao cai hao. Okay, and I think a lot of times Dao Di gets sort of shoved into this idea of it's just place. And I think that misses something, because let's talk about it in terms of lands and hands, right? So it's the right plant, the right place, also the right farmer. And I'll get into that in just a second. And the thing that Dao Di gets to, that I think science is just catching up to, is that the invisible world matters, right? And so these plants have a rhizosphere, which is the microbial world around the roots. They've got a phyllosphere, which is the microbial world on the surface of the plant. And these microbes influence how the plant produces the therapeutic compounds that we find valuable. And it does it in a lot of different ways. Direct production. Sometimes these things are called, the microbes, when they get into the plant, are called endophytes, right? And endophytes can produce their own secondary metabolites that we find useful. Right? We thought the plant was making them. Turns out it was the bacteria, the fungus inside the plant that's making them. That is so cool. Sometimes what happens is the microbes produce secondary metabolites and the plant goes, thank you very much, I'll take that. And then it makes a compound we find valuable. What's even crazier is that these endophytes can actually influence the gene expression of the plant. So it can change, it can regulate how the plant produces things like tannins or antioxidants or terpenes or alkaloids that we find valuable. And sometimes the endophytes irritate the plant. And then the plant has to make these sort of chemical defenses. And it is these chemical defenses that we find valuable. And so a lot of the therapeutic compounds that we get out of plants are a result of this sort of living system. Right? And that's the Dao Di, that's the place, right? So, but if you were to say, like, look, the Dao Di region for Angelica sinensis, right? So Dongui is in southern Gansu province, specifically Min County. That's where the majority of the world's Angelica sinensis is grown. That's the Dao Di region, right? So what would happen if you took that Angelica sinensis and tried to grow it in Peru? Right, those endophytes, that soil bacteria isn't there, or at least it's sort of, they're different, right? Because there's a lot of variability to the soil biome across the world. So you take this Angelica sinensis, you plant it in Peru, and then guess what? The craziest thing happens. The plant secretes things into the soil to selectively feed the kind of microbes they want around them in this rhizosphere. Some of them become endophytes, and even if they're not the same species as in the Dao Di region, they can kind of get the job done, right? And it's not gonna, I tend to think that it's probably pretty good, but not necessarily as good as the Dao Di region, right? And while that's all interesting, here's, that would make anyone ask, well, then why don't we just amp up domestic production? I mean, that's a reasonable question, especially right now. And here's the thing, remember lands and hands? It's the hands, right? Do not, under any circumstances, underestimate the skill it takes to wrestle plants from the ground, right? These farmers have to know more than just how to grow and harvest these things. They've got to tend the soil, plant the plant, tend the plant, harvest the plant, store it, cut it, transport it, and that's the hands and lands and hands, and it is as vital as the land. And those hands extend into an entire industry that is dedicated to making Yao Cai Hao, right? They want to make good herbs, and that is the domestically missing piece. That is the domestically missing piece for us. We don't have that, and we're not going to have it for generations, even if we started now, right? That is why we produce domestically, we source internationally, and we test everything because we think that's the right way to do it. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting. And for the two of you who are still here, let me know if you have any questions. I appreciate you watching. Thank you very much.